Hello, welcome everyone to my talk, Hacks for Adaptive Music Creation. As already introduced, my name is Zofia Domaradzka. I'm a freelance composer. I also sometimes implement music in the game. My main experience is in FMOD. These are some of the projects I worked on. In my past life, I was also a software developer. I spent some time in Berlin working at music tech and native instruments, in synth team, mainly working on Massive X. Most of my examples today will be from the game Yet Another Fantasy Title that has been recently released. So if you're interested in the game, be careful, there will be spoilers. Okay, first let's say a few words what this talk will be about. So I will be talking about simple solutions for making music to follow the player. And I will be basing on my experience working on rather small teams and indie games. So I would like to put here some weight on the constraints that we have when there is one person on the team responsible for everything, or basically if you have a lot of responsibility as one person, because you can design an amazing and complicated music system, but if it's not doable, you do not get to choose your tools, you do not have like maybe a lot of tech support. And in general, you have to make sure it's feasible, it's maintainable, and not to make it bug-prone as well. The agenda is short, the talk is long. The first part will be open, I think, for everyone, even for non-musicians. So I will just walk you through different ideas for constructing adaptive music. These are simple solutions, so we will just, go through them. And in the second part, we'll dive a little bit deeper into some technical implementations in FMOD. And yeah, I will talk about some of my learnings and workaround. So in the first part, I will show you in-game examples, and some examples will be in FMOD, but purely for this visualization purpose. But we'll talk about the implementation in the second part. Okay, so let's start with something that is probably well known to everyone who has ever made music for games or plays games with music, so layering. We had amazing talks yesterday, I think 3 of them about adaptive or interactive music, so you already know the concept of layering if you went to these talks. But just a reminder, this is something I get asked about my clients the most. So just people want to, like developers want to have their game respond to different situations in the game seamlessly. So you can have, for example, 2 layers, one basic layer, second one that just adding on top of it. So the music, the theme is still the same, but the vibe changes. And for example, more danger is coming. As an example, in the Fire Commander game I worked on, we had to extinguish fires. The more there is a fire on the scene, so we're kind of failing, the music gets more intense, more dangerous. Or maybe we're just exploring and someone attacks us or starts chasing us, then the music also has to get kind of more dangerous. Or maybe it changes depending on the time of the day or weather or time of the year. Or maybe there's a dialogue and we want to take the arrangement a little bit down to make space for the sounds of the dialogue. So let's have a look at some tools, how we can construct it. So this is like the very basic one, but let's start with that. So here in the game, you're exploring the world. So the music is kind of calm and explorative, but if we do something unlawful, the police starts chasing us. So we want the music to get, more intense and more dangerous. But we are going into that state and out of the state quite often. So we really have to make sure this is not like another track and we switch. So it really, we want to underline this is same music, but just a little bit different arrangement. So let's start with this basic example and let's hear it. I can hear it. Okay, another tool that I would sometimes use is to, in that very same case of layering, is to have the same theme but twist it in a way that it changes the mood according to the requirement. So this is an example from Moonshine Inc. game. Disclaimer, this is just my implementation for the purpose of the presentation. It's not an in-game implementation. So the request was, we have a map view, and similarly to the previous example, we can get chased by the authorities. But at the level 0, when nothing is happening, we want this chill, calm vibe. But then we want a twist when we level up so that, that it becomes more tense and dangerous. And we have 4 layers of intensity here. So what's happening on layer 0, we have the melody, that is like calm and chill, and on level 1 we have the same melody but on a different scale, so it is twisted a little bit in a way so it provides more tension, and then we continue just adding up more arrangements so it gets more intensive. So let's hear it. Level 1. Up. You go down. And now we'll twist the melody. Let's move to another tool that I would sometimes use. So have the same theme but played on a different instrument depending on the intensity. So we can go and explore the world. We have some lyrical flutes playing, for example, but when we start the fight or we're being chased, we're playing the same melody but, for example, on brass, because it will give us this adventurous and more intense and dangerous vibe. So that's like a simple thing to kind of enhance this effect that this is the same music, but transformed. And now same melody on level 1. Okay, and now I would also sometimes approach constructing such music is drawing or switching melodies. So you for sure want some prominent melodies in your music, but you don't want the player to be overwhelmed. For a lower cost, you can just create, for example, a pool of melodies, like 2 melodies, and draw between them or switch them on and off. So at low cost, you have kind of more music. The music, in my opinion, then it's still kind of memorable, but it's not getting boring so much. And you can also use probabilities to tweak it. So melody 1. And the other melody. And you can see it's drawn, one, the other, and now none is playing. Okay, and continuing on the topic. So I think techniques can be different. So what I would sometimes do is sometimes create some of the tracks like linear songs where I have control over the flow of music. So it's like a full song, maybe I draw some melodies, have a pool of melodies on top of it, or I construct it in blocks. So then you would have like matching blocks, and then you have a pool of blocks that's randomized. So therefore the music will be less linear, maybe less repetitive, and it makes the impression that there's actually more music than there was really made. The thing is with FMOD that I always used, there is no easy way, at least that I know of, where you can map special transitions. If you have like a lot of blocks, for example, to say, if you go from block B to block D, then play this special bridge. Therefore, it was kind of hard for me to make sure all blocks match each other. Even in the Fire Commander game, where the music was electronic, I was basing mostly on timbre and keeping everything more or less in the same key. I still found out I had to like throw out some stuff because it's not throw away some things because they weren't like perfectly aligned. So here in yet another fantasy title, when the music was more melodic and like orchestral, I asked myself a question whether I want to keep it consistent or interesting, obviously both. So I just decided to sometimes have these linear songs and sometimes block-based music. But I had to plan it ahead, how to construct it, so that then I don't have problems that I find out in FMOD that, oh, this transition actually doesn't work well. So I was just focusing on making each block start for a particular segment, each block start with one key, then do whatever I want and finish it in the same key. So I'd, for example, start in G major, then modulate, and then end in G major. And I think that helped me to actually make it easier, the process of matching it, so that I didn't really have problems of throwing away my work later on. And since I found also in multi-instrument in FMOD, the blocks had to be same sizes in order to achieve seamless looping. I would also already organize it visually in the DAW, so I would have, for example, 8 bars, cut all MIDI events, and make sure then to know how long the melody can be, how long the rhythm pattern can be. So maybe that's here an example of this block-based segment. Can we hear it? And layering works with intensity as well. Not yet. And you can also hear the melodies continuing. Okay. What if you want a block-based music segment, but you want another block-based segment on top of it for some more variety? So here I would usually either use the same key for each block or have the other layer non-melodic, so therefore I can make sure it all fits each other. So have something rhythmic, for example. So here we're on a particular level in the game, and we can enter the battle state. So I have this basic pool, or maybe I can show you actually. I have this basic pool with basic music. Then I have another pool with voice sounds, rhythmic voice sounds. And then also at the same level, we have a very special enemy. It's a vampire girl. So using the same music, I still wanted to distinguish this enemy because it's kind of special. So I just recorded on top of it vampire girl sounds. So they kind of draw the attention, and I thought it would be a nice idea to make it, a little bit special for that enemy. And they all can play in whatever configuration, and they will all fit each other because they're non-melodic. And also my neighbors, I think, were calling an exorcist when I was recording this. Now Vampire is on. Yeah, it's a comedy game, by the way. Intros and outros. So that's another idea I would like to talk about. So I would usually use an intro in order to introduce music material or to introduce the player to a new situation in the game. So, and they usually go in pair, I think. So, for example, we are going to fight, so let's create some tension. Or we are going to fight a particular enemy, so let's introduce them. And similar for outros, either I would use it to end the music sequence, but also as a UX to the player, which I think is way more important because it's nice to convey the player the information that this gameplay sequence has finished and even convey the information what was the result. So for example, the fight has ended, we won or we lost, etc., etc. And intros and outros can also serve as musical bridges between music segments. I think it's also same concept. Here we are fighting with a giant tree. So in order to introduce the boss, I am singing lignum, which means wood in Latin. Remember, it's a comedy game. Okay. Okay, that was fun. Also, FMOD is a very powerful tool, and you can use it to process music in a little bit more funky and creative way. So here in this example, I'm going to show you a fragment of a quest when an orc shaman is making the player character transition into a dog, or rather, he's thinking he's transitioning into a dog. And dogs have a higher frequency range of hearing. I couldn't really mimic that, obviously, but I thought maybe if I pitch up the music, apply some effects, I can achieve some nice psychedelic sound. So here I really wanted to underline the transition process as well. So when the player is transitioning, the music is transitioning as well. And it was important for me not to have a separate export for that, but to have just the effects and the snapshot applied because I wanted the player to hear this regular music the player is used to hear all the time, but in a distorted way. So I just wanted to have this effect of changed perception.
Was it? Right. Mästare.
Okay, so let's sum up this part of the presentation with some workflow tips or things that at least I found useful when working with starting with my DAW to create adaptive music. So first of all, I would sometimes test my music, if it's block-based, in DW. So using markers, you know, just transport myself between the blocks to check if they all fit each other. More or less, it's not a perfect, you know, solution. You'll not test it 100%, but at least you get the vibe, whether it works or not, and it saves you time than exporting, re-exporting again, and, you know, re-implementing. Something that I found particularly useful is I use group assignments depending on the track role. So for example, if I have, for a particular intensity level, I have, I don't know, 2 melodies, then I would have a group melody 1, melody 2. The melody can be just a flute, but it can be 3 flutes or flutes and, I don't know, violins or a whole arrangement. So that's why I think it's worth doing it, and the same with the whole levels. So I would group the whole arrangement for level 0, for level 1. That's a nice way to switch between the groups and also to document it in a certain way. And it goes in pair for me with using mix snapshots in my DAW, which my DAW of choice is Studio One. So there is called scenes. So then I have, for example, a mix snapshot which is called level 0, no melodies. Level 1, melody 1. Level 1, full, etc., etc. And therefore I can switch quickly between these states, and I can export very quickly. And also, if I come back to this project a month later, a year later, I have it all there. I know what's where, what's what. Otherwise, I think it would be kind of difficult. Also because I work in this vertical way. I don't have like separate, like duplicated music on the right side on the timeline for another state. So that's something I find really useful. I would recommend, if you do not know your middleware, to test early on small snippets of music to make sure what you intend is doable, not to create like full-blown soundtrack, advanced music system in your head, but then it turns out you're not able to implement it or maintain it, or maybe it's just too time-consuming. And one last thing, I sometimes use stems because I think then you have, instead of like full export, because you have there more control over the mix, but also it helps to act when there are unexpected changes in the pipeline. So for example, there is a new dialogue you didn't expect, so maybe you can just switch off a stem and then have one layer so that it doesn't interfere with the dialogue. Or actually, I even reused some of the music in new places that were unexpected. So for example, I had a quest where I had special music, but it turned out pretty late that it needed an intensity level that I have not designed for it. But I could just take a stem from another event and put it on top, like a drum rhythmic stem. And then I had like new music for like no cost. So it might be also a good idea then to have like sets of BPMs, so then you can reuse it. So maybe if you have one track at 65, the other 67, maybe it's not worth it, and it's good to make it all consistent. Okay, so now let's move on to the second part of the presentation. I use this version of FMOD in case you are interested. So we talked about these vertical layers. So I've shown you examples also with blocks that you can just, turn on next layers on top of the first one. The other way I would also sometimes construct my music is to have horizontal implementation, so have one export for level 0 and a full export for level 1. And then you can have melodies and draw or on top of them. So we are here moving horizontally through the timeline. And what is important, we are using, I can show you here, you probably can see it, but it's transition, offset, set to relative, so that when we're moving to another state, we are sure we are landing at the same moment of the track, but in a different arrangement. So that's important to keep it seamless and consistent. Also, I export just one melody track and then cut it inside FMOD and set different probabilities for different segments, so that it's more, there's more variety. So let's see the example. So I have this transition offset set to relative. Now we move to intensity 1. Yeah, and see the same here. Can we move the screen a bit to the right so we can see what's on the left? And volume automation is in the transition region. One thing I found, though, to be careful about is transition region in the loop region. That's something that is available in newer versions of FMOD, which is great because then you have perfect looping without having to export the tail separately. But I found something that is hard to notice or spot is that if you're transitioning to another region with this relative offset, there is a particular point that when you transition, you land at the end of the event, and that can turn off the whole music in your game, which is not great. So just to present you, I'm not lying. That's what was happening. So for cases like this, I would remove transition region in the loop region and just do it the old school way. So just, yeah, now it works. So just have the tail exported to the beginning. You can cut it in FMOD as well to make it faster. Okay, so I have shown you different kinds of events. I also said I could not find an easy way to have like segments of different lengths in one particular pool to just have seamless looping and particular bridges between them. So I just came up with one main event that combines all kinds of these events. So we have vertical, horizontal, and block-based. I would recommend that solution if you have 3 segments, maybe 5, not more, because it would not be scalable if you have, so many transitions and markers at the end of each segment. That would be bug prone, and then you change something, and I don't know, fading curves disappear, and that's not what we want. Okay, so I will play the video, and I will be stopping it and describing what I did, and after that we will hear this event. Okay, so we can see events inside. Oh, did it stop? Sorry. Okay, so this is the vertical one, horizontal one, and the block-based one. So how are we randomizing the transitions? At the end of each segment, we can go back to the beginning, so loop, or go to any other segment. As you can see, or you cannot really see, unfortunately, because the screen is moved, but each marker has a different probability. If you want equal probabilities, the top one will have 25, 50, and 100. And that's the same for the second segment. Note that the event is longer because we have horizontal approach, but if the bars number are okay, then it will work fine when we are on level 1 intensity as well. Yeah. Okay. And I'm also playing intros, so these are like bridges connecting different segments, and there's a different one depending on whether we are at intensity 1 or 0. So we have this parameter stars active, and we have an outro at the end of the block segment that I play in the transition region. Just because the block-based segment is not a track with a beginning and end, I don't have a control over the flow, I need an outro there. Also, at the beginning, I am doing this randomization as well, because this event is triggered and re-triggered a lot. It can be re-triggered between the quests or when we leave and re-enter the main area. So I didn't want it to start always with the same thing, because that would be boring. So at the beginning, I am also doing this randomization with the markers, but I am also using here a local parameter first play that I created that has value 1, but after we start the event, it goes to 1. So then we are not evaluating these markers at the beginning anymore. And in the block-based section, I am also using a command instrument. Command instrument is an instrument for manipulating values of the parameters. So this is a block-based section, but it kind of has to make up a whole song. So it has to play a number of times in order to have it, consistent. If it played like twice and then came back to the other section, that would be chaotic. So I'm just, for every loop, I'm increasing the parameter by 1, and only after it reaches 20, I decided. I am even considering yeah, I am even considering moving on to another section. And at the beginning of every other section, I am setting the parameter to 0 so that the next time I go to the block-based section, I start with 1. And now let's hear how it sounds. We start with an intro. Then we end, and let's see where we end up. We end up in the block-based section, so we played an intro. Now we go up with the intensity. And we end with an outro. And we start again with an intro, the segment 1. Increase the intensity. Now let's see the connection at level 1 between segments. And now you have a transition with intro level 1 to that part. And you can see with intensity we jump here because this is the horizontal event. Okay. Now let's see an extended example that uses some of the things we have already talked about. I will play it and we'll be talking what is happening, and then I will play it in game. So first we enter the area with the enemy, we create a tension. We have a loop here, so as long as we don't start a dialogue with the enemy, nothing happens. Now we jump here. We talk with the dragon. And now we ended the dialogue, stinger played, we move to this section. The first section finished with an outro. And we will start the event again with attention because there will be a second part of the fight. And we started, second phase. Now there's a dialogue with the enemy. So switch off the layer and leave only drums and synth. And we end up the whole segment with an outro. One thing I wanted to pay attention here is that my approach here was to be as independent as I could with the parameters. We have a few of them here. So I'm pretty sure all the composers here know it's hard for the rest of the team to test their music and to know whether it plays out correctly or not. So of course you can write instructions and ask people how to implement it in the engine, in the quest, in the code. But I'm pretty sure it will be hard for them to verify it. So I always try to think and, for example, at the end, use command instrument to reset the parameters to the default state or implement them in a way, see they all came back to this original values. So then whatever happens on the side of the engine, I know I always end up in the default state. I don't have to worry about it. If there's a problem, I can fix it myself in FMOD and I don't have to engage anyone else. Let's now see the same example, but in-game.
Waar ik het op beginnen moet. Jimmy, that's kapon. Maat in hem.
Music changed.
But
The fight starts. So we played an outro for the first segment. Now nothing happens. Ah, now we start again the event with attention.
we kunnen er wel pet in de maal. Meer snel. Ja, we kunnen hier, maar ik niet nou, maar het gewoon niet.
Now we switch off one layer.
What?
Okay, now let's move on to multiple marker scalability versus magnet regions. So if you have a lot of segments, and especially if you can move from each one to each one, it might be a good idea to use magnet region, because if you used markers, you would have a lot of markers at the end of every section, and that's really tedious work, and it's bug prone and hard to maintain. So if you use magnet region, it's a region that says, hey, if the parameter is equal to 2, come to me. So it's much clearer and easier. Also note with magnets region, relative offset, I had the same problem that I described, so I'm using here the tails at the beginning of each section. So this is a section when an orc shaman is watching the player character getting into a trance. The more he gets into the trance, the more psychedelic the music gets. So let's hear the example. Yeah, and you see here the inception level is 2, so the magnet region said, hey, come to me. Okay, and now a few words about scatter instrument. Scatter instrument is probably mostly well known and loved by the sound designers. So it's an instrument that can simulate samples being fired up from different distances, at different volumes and spawn rate. So here it's a segment of a music for a duck temple in the game. We also have layering here because we can fight inside. So the layering is done in the same way as we have discussed, but I am using here also the scatter instrument with duck quacking. And when we just enter the area, the duck quacking is kind of soft and just give you the ambience and the idea. But when we start the fight and we go up the intensity level, then they get louder, and also they get spawned more often, and it's also quantized. So they kind of become the rhythm for the music. So you can see spawn rate is automated and the volume is automated. Again, it's a comedy game. Now you're gonna fight. Okay, I think we still have 3 minutes, so I can show you also the implementations of the snapshot for the dog quest. So snapshots, at least I mostly know them and use them for this utility, so not creative purposes. So like controlling filter or volume music when you have a pop-up or a dialogue or whatever. So here I am using the snapshot for this effect that I showed you in the first part. So I am pitching up the music, and I'm also applying effects like a flanger and a chorus on a bass. So the send to the music group by default is set to 0, but when we switch on the snapshot, then the volume for the music group goes down to 0, but the send goes up. So we only hear this distorted music. And also there's an envelope on the snapshot intensity so that there's this smooth transition again that goes in pair with the music pitching. Here's the intensity envelope. And there it goes down. Yeah, one thing worth mentioning that I learned to be careful to manage your snapshots and control in a pragmatic way in one place, to be sure they're switched off at every situation. If you fail, if you go out to the main menu, because if by any chance it's left on, it will destroy the whole audio in your game. So just keep it in mind. Okay, wow, we finished. So a few takeaways and a summary. We talked about some techniques for creating adaptive music, so intros, outros, intensity layers, drawing melodies, drawing from blocks, processing music. We talked about some constraints when creating such kind of music. So we talked about block lengths in FMOD, transitions, key changes, layering, and scalability of markers. Things that I think it's good to remember from the talk is to not overcomplicate the structure and your design if you do not have the available tools and if you don't have enough support and time. So plan ahead, keep that in mind. Think about maintenance and bug proneness of your solution, again, especially if you're the only person that actually can work on that part, and be as independent as you can be in your implementation. And think about the music structure both in terms of musicality and the UX, because that's also a very important goal, to inform the player what is happening, not only accompany the actions on the screen. And think about the music structure before you compose and reflect it in your DAW, because then it will be way easier to manage it, export it, come back to it, and you just will save time. And if you do not know your tools, you don't have maybe experience with middleware you'll be using, test your solution on short fragments before you create the whole soundtrack. So. Yeah, that's me, my website. If you want to connect on Twitter, Instagram, I'll be happy to. Thank you.